Now, for all its wealth in natural and human resources, Nigeria remains very poor and underdeveloped. The country's poverty profile is fairly grim. According to data from the World Bank, 47.3% of Nigerians, 98 million people, live in multi-dimensional poverty. Seemingly aware of this, the Buhari administration has set the very ambitious goal of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty by the year 2030. It has also launched a new national development plan, which is a successor to both the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, as well as the Vision 2020. In this new plan, which is set to run from 2021 to 2025, the government will focus on investment in infrastructure, ensure economic stability, and improve living conditions of Nigerians, among other targets. But with Buhari revealing that Nigeria will need investment worth 348 trillion naira to fully achieve this plan, what can the average Nigerians expect? Well, with me in the studio to discuss this is economist and development expert, Professor Ken Ife. Prof, you are welcome to the Arise
Thank you
interview.
for having me.
Yes. Okay, welcome, Prof, as I said. At the Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday, the President launched this National Development Plan, which the government said is the successor to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which ran from 2017 to 2020. That one has ended now, and the government said it helped Nigeria to exit from 2 recessions. Was that correct?
I think so. Because that was the plan that was operative. Although it's superimposed on the Vision 2020,
yes,
all of which ended in 2020. And they saw, if you remember when we had the first recession in 2017, it was so bad, with revenue plummeting by about 60% from oil. And our reserve took a nose dive. The Nigerian partner said, we need a plan. We need a plan to engage. So we produced that recovery and growth plan, and immediately it had marching orders for all MDAs, and they engaged with it.
Yeah.
So that played us out of recession, though it took 3 quarters to get out.
Yeah.
But in the 2020 last year, there was a far more handshake between fiscal and monetary policy intervention, and the intervention was quantitative. Okay. So that was why we spared no resources, we borrowed a lot more, we pumped money into the system, we got out within a quarter. So to that extent, the plan helped.
Succeeded, it helped, yes. But then the pandemic came,
yes,
and we dived into another recession,
yes, which was far more, which was an existential problem, because it was a matter of life and death. And at the same time, there was another existential problem, which is insecurity, pervasive insecurity across all the 6 regions. And it was of such intensity and asymmetry that if you do nothing, which is not an option, all of us will be overrun like Afghanistan. And if you have a home to go to, then you'll be very lucky.
That is very grim, Prof. But this National Development Plan that the President launched yesterday, he said that it will require an investment of 348 trillion naira. That's a huge amount of money, of which he said the government itself will mobilize 49 trillion and expects the private sector to mobilize 298 trillion. Is that realistic?
Well, it's as realistic as it could be, because it wasn't like throwing figures. What we have had in the past are figures. For example, during the 2020 plan, we expected GDP to rise to 600 billion, and making us by 2020, making us the 20th biggest economy. But I couldn't actually see the pathways by which we were going to climb to that figure. Although, in fairness, by September, December 2014, our GDP rose to 575 billion, making us number 21. And suddenly the oil crisis came and we crashed to $330 billion. Obviously, you know that whilst the Naira GDP was constantly going up, it has to be deflated by, you have to bring in the dollar. You have to convert to dollar, and that dollar value was heading down. So that was why the whole thing came down.
Well, some of the other targets of the plan appear to be quite ambitious. For example, the president says he expects a 5% annual GDP growth rate during the period, the creation of 21 million jobs, as well as lifting 35 million people out of poverty.
In that period,
within that period,
out
up
of
to
the
2025.
On the 100 million.
Yeah, the 100 million is the 2030 target.
Okay.
Now,
how does that sound? It's not wishful thinking. The reason is because the philosophy of the plan is to bring investment. That's why you're looking at investment of the order of almost 350 trillion. And then government, all levels of government are going for about 50, federal about 30, state 14 points, and then 7 for local government. But the bulk of it is in the private sector, which is at almost 300 trillion. Now, that means that we are bringing private sector in and giving them a commanding role in pushing the economy forward. And you will see all the measures coming in to fulfill that task. You've seen them going for on infrastructure. You've seen the government going for infrastructure company, PLC, which it has capitalized with 1 trillion and gone out to market to raise 15 trillion. And we get that, it will solve some of the chronic problem of external borrowing because they would probably take over much of those infrastructure, national infrastructure that the federal government is working on, and then rework them, make them more viable, and then run with those, as well as, you know,
thank you very much, Prof. We are going for a short break now. When we come back, we will continue with the interview. Welcome back to the Arise interview. So, the Nigerian government has launched a development plan to lift millions out of poverty. The plan succeeds the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which expired in 2020. I still have with me here in the studio economist and development expert, Professor Ken Ife. Prof, thank you. We continue with the interview. You are making a point before we went on break about the targets of the plan, including how to bring in all these 300 plus trillions from the private sector, most of it foreign investors. Maybe you may wish to continue from
just
there.
To explain the underlying philosophy. It's not about raising 350 trillion and then distribute it to poor people and get them out of poverty. That's not what this plan is doing. This plan is saying, get the private sector on the driving seat. We hope to raise investment of 350 trillion. We, the government sector, will go and find 50 trillion, but let the private sector go and raise the 300. And by doing that, they will create projects. They will create wealth. And that process of creating wealth is what creates employment. That's where you can hope to get 35 million in employment in the time frame. And by creating employment, you generate disposable income. And with that disposable income, you can drive and pay for your education, for your health, and then you can sustainably reduce poverty. That is what it says, and that's the cycle. Right. Now, in this plan, let's put it in proper context. The context is this. We have a 2050 plan, Agenda 2050. We'll start working on it next year. But we already started working. This is the successor. This is the next week. And then we have vision that by 2050, Nigeria will have a GDP of 6.4 trillion, which is a PWC. Then by 2030, we'll have a GDP of 1.64 trillion. And then also, by this GDP calculation for 2025, if you plug that 5%, that 5% growth rate, based on the current GDP, you will come close to $600 billion GDP by 2025.
I see.
Which is like what the dream it was 11 years ago in 2009, when our 2020 said that we are heading to 600 billion by 2020.
Exactly.
So we've come a full circle. So what then happens is this. With that, you are now going to say the only way you can get to that order is to have an infrastructure. That way, because our infrastructure, we have only 35%. The stock of infrastructure in our country is only 35% of GDP. And very, very poor. If you consider South Africa is about 80% of their GDP, and many countries are over 100%. So we need to continue to invest in infrastructure. But it's not just road and rail, but also digital infrastructure. Because digital infrastructure is getting far more important than before. Not just on broadband, but on payment systems and all kinds of things, and blockchain and all of that. They're all coming in. So, and young people are going with it. So we're investing heavily. You know, we have a Ministry of Digital Economy and Communication. So all of that are going to receive it. And one more infrastructure is quality infrastructure that enables you to produce food that are relevant and, meeting the requirements for you to export those. You need that infrastructure in place. There's also soft infrastructure. So we'll leave all that. Then you come to the other area is economic growth. Economic growth and development. And that's also where you have many other service sectors, and you have the manufacturing sectors. That's where we worked on those. And a lot of projects are there to ensure that we build the economy in a very, very sustainable way. We produce agricultural, and you've seen the kind of investment that are already hitting the grounds. If you take CBN with the Anchor Borrowers Program, getting 4 million farmers, getting access to finance without collateral, just by having their BVN and doing almost 5 million hectares. So you now see another one coming to the manufacturing sector and calling it 100 for 100 PPPs, where you can borrow out to 5 billion and about 360 companies are going to get it in a year. It's a huge investment, over 1.5 to 1.7 trillion. And that will close the gap in that. Then you move to the other area, which is the public admin. Of course, that's where you have fiscal responsibility and the aggressive push by government to increase revenue. Very, very aggressive push.
You see, Prof, you laid it out very, very sensibly, and it sounds very optimistic. But there was something the president said when he launched it yesterday, that there is no doubt that with effective and sustained implementation, Nigeria will achieve a quantum leap in unlocking its potentials. That's where the problem is, sustained and effective implementation from now to 2025 to 2030 and even to 2050. Do you see that happening, given the record of the public service in this country in over the decades?
Okay. Neither the investment nor the delivery is anticipated to be done by the public sector. Public sector is the minority in this. They're only doing 50 trillion out of 350 trillion. So they have a lot of work to do with their money, which is because to fight corruption, for example, you have to have investment. Because you're going to invest in the technology, GIFMI system, IPPIS for personnel management system, you have the treasury account. All of those technology-driven things is what they are using to fight corruption, to close the loopholes. So they have their own job cut out for them. But the center of gravity is private sector, bringing both the investment and then the capacity to turn the whole system around.
But
and
Prof,
that is where the trust is.
It is, but the public sector still has a key role in that, because they are in charge of the policy framework and environment that could attract. I mean, before people will bring 350 trillion naira, they have to be very confident in the operating environment.
Absolutely. The investment environment is under constant reform. And as you have seen, one aspect of it has been the ease of doing business, which is the World Bank. And government has actually tried in this, because we're always at the fourth quartile in all known socioeconomic indicators, infrastructure indicators and logistics performance index, competitiveness indicators. There are many of them, and we're always in the bottom quartile. The one that hurts that much is the World Bank Ease of Doing Business. And government has actually tried, because they have moved positions, improved our position by having omnibus law and all kinds of things, and then worked on the tax regimes, removing multiple taxation. Different finance acts are also coming in. So they have been working on the investment, improving the investment environment to bring confidence. But the biggest challenge is insecurity. The reason why the FDI is not showing, reflecting all this effort is because of pervasive insecurity. So FDI has been coming down, and even the portfolio investment, foreign portfolio investment that was very high in 2015-16 suddenly, caved in, but by the recession, but by insecurity, but also the COVID.
It's a very big matter, the insecurity. We have only a minute to round up the discussion. Prof, up to the 60s and 70s, even 80s, we used to have national development plans. Under the military regimes, they were quite effective because all tiers of government keyed in because it was some kind of unitary system. Do you see that happening now? Will the state governments and the local governments key in very effectively into this national development plan? They will,
because the sixth pillar is regional development. That regional, we have two regional entities now. You have the NDDC, and then you have the Northeast Development Commission. So hopefully the other ones will come in. The other four will come in. We have 6 geopolitical zones. And the idea is that you want to bring the subnational entities on board. Because after all, economic development is on the concurrent legislative list. And many of the items on the residual list are economic in nature as well, which are all in the domain of the states and local government. So government is actually giving impetus to that, to actually say to them, yes, you collect your money to work on as 36 states plus 1, but we also want to enable you to build capacity at a sub-regional entity.
That is very true. And Prof, we thank you very much for your very interesting insight and mastery over this topic. Thank you very much.